go to full screen like this. So yeah, we'll just again try to make it as like casual as possible and just go from there. So
no problem.
All right, what's going on, everybody? It's Matt again, Poke Checking Podcast. This is episode 14, and this is a new type of deal. I've got my friend JP here. We're at the school where I teach and where JP helped us out this year, and I thought he'd be great to have for our first like in-person interview. This is definitely not the best setting for this, but it's what we got. We're going to work with it. JP is a former goalie all the way till high school, and a fellow Penguins fan, fellow Fleury fan, which is like the best connection that we could ask for. So we're just going to spend some time talking to somebody who's actually played goaltender. I'm going to live vicariously through your stories. And hopefully everybody enjoys the conversation. Really happy to have the opportunity to talk to you, man. So I know when we met this year, I don't know how it came about. Do you remember how we made the connection that you were also a goalie fan or a hockey fan? Because it was right before the school year started, and we were running around, and it was crazy in here. You remember that?
You always wore a jersey on Thursdays, right?
Yeah, but had I worn one at that point before school started?
I can't remember if you did or didn't.
Yeah.
I just remember at some point we got talking. I made a mention of hockey, and I think you asked me about Fleury, and I just said, I'm from Pittsburgh. Of course I know Fleury.
Okay, yeah. There was somehow it was mentioned, and like my eyes lit up. I'm like, I got somebody to talk to about Fleury at work, which, when you're one of the few male employees at an elementary school, the odds to even meet somebody that likes sports, let alone wants to talk hockey, is pretty rare, which is funny too, because our music teacher, her husband's a big Penguins fan, so she was all disappointed, when they lost again. So that was kind of before you got here. We used to talk all the time, like, they're gonna have another chance to win it, So, so anyway, you and I, when we first started talking, you had mentioned that you had played goalie, because I know we were told that you came from Purdue, where you were not playing hockey anymore, right?
No, they only had I think it was a D3 club. And I did go to the call out for it, and they were initially excited. And then they said, I'm like, where do you practice? They go, Illinois. I was like, not going to work on a weeknight.
Yeah, how are you going to make it there and back for class the next day? So, but you did, as we started talking, you told me about all your experiences before you went to college. And I thought, man, it would be really fun to talk about that and just share it with everybody else, especially because on this podcast, I've had all my collecting friends on, and we talk about goaltending, and we have our opinions about, who's performing really well, whose value is down because their team's not very good. But then seeing it from your eyes is probably completely different from me, because you've played the position and how much critiquing that comes from that position. And you're also the first one to be like given credit on a 5-0 shutout when you made 12 saves. Like, oh man, JP was on his game, made 12 saves, didn't give up a goal. It's like, okay, like there's definitely this huge middle ground on either end that we don't even really think not we, but the general fan, that blames Fleury for giving up 3 goals, and we know that it's not his fault. So maybe we can shed some light on that later too, which would be fun. But when I grew up, I played hockey. All I wanted to do was be a goalie. That was my dream when I was a little kid. And one of my last games, we didn't have goalie gear. He would put me between the net, but I didn't have goalie gear. And I remember, I'll just share the story on here. I literally peed my pants because I was like, I didn't want to get off the ice because I was having so much fun. I did it right there on the ice. It was super embarrassing, and that was kind of the end of my hockey career, funny enough, because we moved to Soldotna, Alaska, and they had a huge rink. You think, hey, I was going to have a chance to play. And I just didn't fight for it enough to be goalie, but I loved going there and watching the kids play goalie. And so this would be kind of fun for me to, live these stories through you. But I wonder, similarly, when you were growing up, what was it that said, okay, the goaltender is the position that I'm going to play? What? Because you always hear all these stories. This one kid's like, nobody would play goalie, so they threw me in net, and I put on these old pads from like the 70s and did it. Like, what was it that got you started?
It's funny. That's actually almost exactly how it went down for me.
Is it?
I first started playing because my dad came home from a beer league one time. I asked him, I was, I think, 5 years old, and I asked him, what's all the gear? And he goes, I play hockey. I go, what? He goes, yeah. He goes, you want to play? I go, sure. So started to learn how to skate. Didn't really take to being a forward, just I didn't like having to go around all the drills.
Right.
And there was a goalie camp going on at the same time.
Right.
So I was seeing like 12, 15 goalies all pulling out these pads and seeing them all work the ice. I'm like,
Right.
oh, that looks so cool. But my parents were like, no, you'd be a forward, because that's what my dad knew. And he didn't know how to teach a goalie.
Yeah.
But at that time, I was a little undeterred. And there was one day I was in, I guess, my school's youth developmental team.
Okay.
And we didn't have a goalie. And our coach was just like, we need a goalie. My hand shot up immediately.
I'll do it.
Yep. And
that's funny.
The best part was, I think my mom could tell what was going on, and she was powerless to stop it.
Right. Here goes all the money toward gear and everything, right? Here it comes.
We'll get into that a little later. Let's just say there's a reason I didn't get a car the first time I was 16.
All the money spent on goaltending, huh?
Yeah, it's not cheap, but oh God, was it fun. But yeah, they threw me in these old bubble pads, heavy leather.
Were they brown, like that brownish yellowish color? Or?
They weren't brown. They were black, but they had that similar look to them, where they had the little ripples and then the straps across.
They were
the front.
well used, right?
Oh yeah. I didn't get my first fresh pads until I was, I think, like 11 or 12. It was the first time I got my first new set.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah,
so it's very like Artis Urbe, where he like would meticulously fix his pads over and over, and he'd use the same ones for years. So you could tell they were super dirty and nasty looking, but they fit him perfect. So it must have been something like that, where just kept reusing them as long as they could.
Pretty much until my knee was starting to come out of the pocket. Then
that's funny.
Then it'd be like, okay, we need to get a new set, because otherwise I'm gonna get my knee busted up.
Right. So you fast forward to like, I don't know, like when did you feel like this is something that you were really passionate about? Did it stick almost immediately, or was there some growing pains at the beginning, just kind of learning the position and whatnot at a young age? Because you said you really, how old were you when you put your hand up? Like 8 years old, you said?
Yeah, I was in third grade.
Yep. So 8, 9 years old. I mean, did it stick right off the bat?
Oh, it stuck right off the bat. I was in love with the position. Nice. The funny thing about being a goalie is that everyone who grows up to be a coach, they grew up being a forward. Coaches don't know how to teach goalies, and especially going to that 90s, early 2000s, the position was starting to change. So all these old coaches, they were pulling from stuff they knew from the 80s. Like the first things I learned to do were 2-pad stacks, kick saves. Right. I looked like a 90s guy.
That's awesome.
But a lot of it was us having to just go find books. I remember that I had this big one. It was called the Goalie Handbook. I think it had
Goalie Handbook. Nice.
I think it had I had Dominic Hasek on the cover when he was a Sabres.
That makes sense, because he was kind of textbook, but he also wasn't, right? Because he'd make those flailing saves where he'd just throw everything at it.
He played his own way. I've never seen another goalie play like Hasek.
It's almost funny that he ends up on the cover of that, because like if you were to think of a goalie from the 90s that was textbook, who's the first one that comes to mind?
Oh, Patrick Wall, probably. He was because he was one of the first guys to really start that, what a lot of people call butterfly style. I sometimes refer to as blocking style.
Okay.
And that was because the game was starting to pick up, and just also pads too. They got lighter. I'll talk a little bit about when I got to middle school and that first Reebok flat pad came out.
Okay.
That changed the game forever.
Did it really?
Yeah.
It was also lighter, right?
It was lighter, but the underside in between where the 5-hole is.
Okay.
Those were the first set really where you started to see it was completely flat, which allowed goalies to do what's called lateral adjust, where they're in that butterfly and the one leg goes up and they push.
Right.
Yeah, that's what we call it. And so that really changed how goalies were able to move on the ice.
Interesting.
So that was so it was a mix of that equipment and the speed that really changed it.
Because I think of the 90s when I was first becoming a fan, and I had the Penguins poster on my wall. Obviously, we both loved that team. Yeah. And Barrasso was on there. And not knowing anything back then about what type of goalie he was, and you go watch highlights and you see he was a stand-up goalie. Like, he's making all the saves. Like, he's kind of leaned over, kick, block. He's throwing the block or the glove. Like, he really didn't get down as much. And that it's amazing to see, like, as it transitioned from him to, Jocelyn Thibault is one of my favorite 90s goalies. He played butterfly. He was one of, not the first, but like he was an 18-year-old kid drafted into the league, and he's playing that way. Felt like that mid-90s is when that shift happened. Do you remember ever seeing highlights of like the stand-up guys back then and thinking like, well, this is kind of odd, or was it still something your coaches tried to get you to do?
They still try to get us to do, because again, they didn't know the position. They didn't really study how or why it was changing.
Okay.
Like most of the time when I did my summer camps with our school teams,
Mm-hmm.
we would do like the video room, and I'd sit there for an hour, and I'd usually be bored out of my mind for waiting for like the one or two goalie highlights our coach would feed us. But we were pretty much on our own for figuring out how to become a goalie.
Right.
I think the thing I remember, I was always confused, but then I remember when I was in, I think, early high school, this was when I started being introduced to coaches and trainers who were on the cutting edge of goaltending. And somebody brought in a pair of old 80s pads. And one of the coaches for kicks decided to put them on for an on-ice session.
Okay.
And we got to feel them around. This was when I was using the most modern. It was like the 2009 Reebok.
Okay. Fleury was using that same set practically, right?
Yeah.
I remember that.
It was 3 times heavier than what we were using.
Really? And this is like the orangish brownish pads, right? From the 80s?
The old brown, like true leather.
Like Hextall Waugh wore those. Yeah, okay. I definitely know what you're talking. Grant Fuhrer, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah. And our guy tried to do a butterfly in them. He was like, I can't get up. And this was a D1 college kid.
Wow.
And he was struggling. And the more he went down, the water soaked them up and they got even heavier. So sure enough, he just started doing kick saves because he's like, I can't keep it up, going down and up.
Wow.
And
that's really interesting. I never really thought about it to that depth, why they didn't play that way, because they couldn't.
I didn't really think about it much either. And then I also didn't think much about the face mask too, because that was back when they used to have it was the plastic molded to the face.
Yeah, right.
The last helmet I used, I think it was an iTech 800. I remember it costed me $800.
Oh my gosh.
It had 5 layers though of alternating between fiberglass and Kevlar.
Right.
The thing was basically bulletproof.
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, almost like a Formula One driver helmet, you know?
Yeah. It was, so you got to think like that's what I was using. I had a clear beard so I could protect from pucks coming up.
Yeah.
So
they called it a clear beard, huh?
Yeah.
That's the first time I ever heard it called, because I always called it a dangler.
So there's the dangler, but then I had a more narrow one that kind of fit snug under my mask.
Oh, okay.
So that one was called the clear beard.
I have to look that up because I've seen that. And then like Urbe had one too that, he had that old school mask, the round Hasek mask, and he'd have a dangler off that, but it was shaped differently. I'll have to go look that up now. That's cool.
Yeah, and I could get into the equipment all day because then goalies get into the debate of like the cat eye mask versus the grid mask. Some say cat eye gives you more field of vision. Others say it's weaker and will bend more with pucks.
Well, and that's, it'd be interesting real quick while we're on this, and then we'll hop into like middle school as it got more competitive. But, you think of those masks. When I went to the hockey shop, first time I'd been to a hockey shop in like 20 years, this last summer, I took a picture of a cat eye mask, the ones that all the pros are using now.
Yeah.
Gosh, how does a puck not go through there? But I realized like there's not a lot blocking your vision. But in like the CHL, and I believe the East Coast ECHL, or there's a few leagues that require the grid mask, way more bars and stuff. Which one did you prefer?
I used the grid mask.
Okay.
I think that was what I was comfortable with. And to be honest, it doesn't affect your view as much.
It doesn't? Okay.
No, once that puck's coming down your zone, you know where it is, you know where you're tracking it, and you hardly even notice the cage is there.
Hard to blame it on the cage, huh?
Yeah.
Interesting. Now, back when you were in middle school here, you started things got more competitive, and I'm guessing in the Pittsburgh area, hockey is pretty big over there.
Oh, yeah.
So you're playing, lots of hockey. It's not just like seasonal. It's all the time, I'm guessing, right?
Yes. So during the winter, I think there were times, because again, goalies were also kind of a scarce commodity.
Right.
I think I ended up playing for 2 teams. I would do my school team, and then there was an amateur leagues. And it was kind of interesting too, because the similar age groups, we would all blend in. And so we'd all see each other, get to know each other.
Oh, cool.
And that was, I think, when it started getting a little bit more serious for me, because that's when it was like, okay, I'm starting to get a record. And I remember my first year I played for an amateur team. It was travel. And that was when actually I think I really started getting a good reputation within at least the 2 ice rinks that I played at.
Nice. That's good.
And yeah, I remember our first season I got 4 shutouts.
Dang.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
It was God, I remember the first one. We were on the road in Johnstown, and we played 2 games back to back. Destroyed the first team the one night at Penn State. Went to Johnstown, and I was just like, okay, here goes a game. We're going to the third period. I go up to my coach, and everyone's like, holy crap, this could happen. You could do it.
And that's a big deal back then, right? Like shutouts are definitely, I mean, I know they're hard to come by in the pros, but I'm guessing that's one of the hardest things to do is at a young age to get a shutout, right? Because, deflection here or there and type deal. So how much time was left when your coach said that?
It was going to third period, which for that age, they were 12-minute periods.
And so going into the third period with no goals against you was not common at all at that age group, I'm guessing, right?
No, I usually got scored on if it wasn't like late in the first, it was mid-second.
Okay.
So this one, it was like, okay, wow, this really could go down. I think the joke again, and we'll get into this in the next question, I think you wanted to, but there was a second coach with us that he wasn't on the bench, but he was going around and the parents were starting to get excited. And he was shushing them, like, don't say it, don't say the word.
Right. Pitcher has a no-hitter going, be quiet.
Yep.
Just zip it up. Yeah.
I will say one funny thing, too. That same year, that was also the first time I won a tournament.
Yeah.
And I remember it came down to the final game. We went into overtime, and then it went into a shootout.
Oh, man. That's got to be, like, the most exciting and also nerve-wracking thing, right?
Oh, yeah. The funny thing, too, though, was nobody told me, because this is my first year, nobody told me how that worked.
Right.
So they just sent me back to the net, but nobody told me it was a shootout. So then I see the player line up, and I was like, oh, this is what's happening.
Okay.
So, and then I come down. He shot a big – it was actually funny because I was, like, very nervous, and this kid was trying to come in fast and do the big stick handling. And there was a point where he just kept going, and I was ready, and then I just stood up. I was like, what? And I just poke checked him. And it went off to the side, and the ref was just like, no goal. The kid looked like, what? And the ref's like, dude, he can do that.
Right. Yeah, because Fleury is famous for doing that a lot on his shootouts. So talk to me like that first shutout. Obviously, it's a very good memory for you. Yeah. Did you have any close calls, close shaves going into the last few minutes where you thought, oh, boy, like just got a piece of it or like kick save or anything like that?
Anytime that shot went off and there was a rebound or a scramble, I was just like, no.
Yeah, I just jump on it. Were you taught at a young age too? Because, rebound control has been something that has come into my mind a little bit more with people criticizing Fleury in Minnesota for giving up too many and whatnot. But were you taught at that age, and at this point we're about 12, 13 years old, right?
Yeah.
Were you taught at that age to the puck hits you, cover it up if it's anywhere near, or was it more of like you want to put a rebound into an open area where your team can get it? What was like the philosophy back then?
So when I first met my one goalie coach and he really started to work with me on that, the two main ways was, one, if it hits your chest, you either want to put glove over it or you want to sink back in and just absorb the puck.
Keep it, right? Okay.
Sometimes the puck's not in a position where you can do that, in which case you want to basically have your butterfly set in a way where it's going to the boards or out at a bad angle.
Right.
The worst thing you could do would be to also you use your stick. That was a big one, was basically you make the arc in front of you and you try and push it to the corners or you try and push it to where your defense is.
Okay.
The worst thing you could do is push one straight across the crease and leave it open for a back.
Right in
shot.
the middle. Yeah, exactly. Right. So, I mean, do you feel like that was, especially in that game where you're about to get your first shutout, was that something where did you feel like you got sharper as the pressure was on, or did you feel like you got nervous? Because I've always wondered, I mean, the pros are one thing. I mean, these guys, Fleury's got over 70 shutouts in his career, but I look at a guy, that's looking for his first shutout. Do you feel like they tighten up a bit, or do you feel like as a goalie you were able to focus in just that little bit extra?
I think I was able to focus in that little bit extra.
Were you?
I think if I remember, usually when I got to the point where it was midway through the third period, I looked to cover everything. I didn't want a chance to rebound, so I just stopped the play anytime.
Okay.
And that was, again, mainly one of those things where you just kind of knew it's like any chance you can get, stop the play, give your team a chance, do that.
Okay, gotcha. So was there a shot toward the end of that first shutout, or was your team down there dominating for the last little bit type deal?
I if I can remember, I think it was a good back and forth. I got a couple more shots.
Nice.
But I think if I remember how that ended, the last few minutes, it was down the other zone.
Oh, nice. They kind of take a deep breath and relax. But that's awesome. So 4 shutouts that year in your first year. And so obviously at this point, you're like, okay, this is something that I could do for a while, not just, for the next couple of years. Did you continue, playing? Because I'm just trying to picture like what's hockey like for these younger kids. Did you continue playing really competitively all the way up to high school from there? Or did that like get you recognized a little bit more? Or do you feel like that just like you already knew what high school you're going to play with? I'm guessing, right? They don't recruit that much at that age.
So at that age, you could, at middle to high school, you could start trying out for like AAA teams.
Okay, gotcha.
And that's like the youngest level of national competitive play.
Okay, gotcha. I think I know who that. Yeah, like the Seattle Thunderbirds and them. I've seen them. Those are like 16 and up kids.
I think for us it was like the Pittsburgh Viper. There were a couple of the teams like that. It was like Pittsburgh Vipers, Baby Penguins, Badgers. Yeah,
Baby Penguins. That's awesome.
Yeah, there was a couple of those teams around. But,
were you at the? Did you feel like you were close to the point where that could be an option for you? I mean,
yes, I think it was just kind of a matter of being able to swing it because a lot of times those guys were like they were constantly traveling or they'd be out of school. So I don't really think that was something my parents wanted me to. Because also
big sacrifice for sure.
And it's also like it's fun to do and all that, but if you're not the path to the NHL, the way my coach put it the first time I was in goalie camp was every year 36 guys from around the world get picked to be in the NHL. Your odds aren't high.
No.
So there's that balance of when you get to that age, like realism of like, I could play at that level, but what am I going to lose as far as the future if I'm pursuing that? And, but to make no mistake, I played with AAA guys all the time. And then when I got into high school, my coach knew a few guys who were in college and I started to practice against them.
Okay.
So it was one of those, like, yes, I didn't play for one of those teams, but I absolutely played against guys at that level all the time. Well,
and I think this is a fun story to tell too, because there's, being a big basketball buff and coaching a lot of kids here in high school and whatnot, I've seen so many instances of like high levels of talent, but it just didn't work out, or they go to college and it doesn't work out for them. They come back the next year, tail between their legs type thing. I think we hear 10 times more of those than the guys that make it, or an injury or something. You know what I mean? Like there's always, I feel like there's so many more factors against you to be successful at the next level than there are the other way around. But, you end up playing through high school, like you said, against some really good competition. When did it become a reality? Like, okay, I'm pretty sure I'm going to go to school and pursue another path. Even though you love hockey, obviously, you still would love to play any chance you get. Too bad we're here in Sitka. None of us can play. But when and how did you make that decision?
I think that was kind of towards the end of my sophomore year. I accidentally got a concussion from a puck being fired at the back of my head. It was a warm-up. We were warming up against a game, and I don't know why I decided to come out of the net by staying on the ice and just pushing myself out. And it was just at the same time one of my teammates did a wrist shot to get a puck out from behind the net, and it just clocked me. So I was out for the back half of the season.
Geez.
I mean,
that's rough.
At youth hockey, the concussions, they take that pretty seriously.
Yeah.
I was lucky that was my only one.
No joke. Yeah, especially as a goalie, right?
Well, actually, I was a lot safer than some of the other players because, like I said, I had a heavy helmet. Mm-hmm. And most of the time, it forced my chin down, or when you're playing, your chin's tight, you're looking forward, and most of the time your head doesn't move as much.
Okay.
I had one, I remember it actually, I still have the mark on my helmet. It ripped the plastic off. It was a hard one-timer from like one of our captains, and that one actually was the only time I got my head rocked from a shot.
That's pretty impressive then.
Yeah, he actually was, I think, one of the only guys who could have gone on to be junior A amateur level.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, and playing against those guys obviously make you a lot better. But after the concussion, did you just end up stopped playing right there and then, or did you just kind of feel that drive kind of slowly come down? Or
I still had the drive. Mm-hmm. It was more of just that thought of, okay, there's a lot of other things. It was also time like I was able to focus on a lot of other things.
Okay.
And that kind of realization of like, okay, I can have fun with this. I'll love to be competitive with this, but I know ultimately I'm not going to be pushing on to next level.
Okay.
More than likely. And again, we had a lot of talent on our team. Nobody went past junior A. Even the guys who were like really good and people are like, oh, this guy could go on. No, they all ended up going to college, getting degrees, doing life.
Okay.
It's especially because you think too, like Fleury, he got drafted at 18.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of us were like, if you're in high school hockey and you're 16, 17, you're already well behind.
Yeah, right. Because his story, he was like, what, 14, 15 when he went to, is it not Wilkes-Barre? That's where their Penguins minor league team is. Where is it? I'm drawing a blank because I can already see their jerseys in my head right now and the colors and everything. Anyways, it'll come to me. But he stayed with the host family. I don't know. I called something else, right, in Canada, but stayed with the host. So there's a lot of sacrifice that goes into making it there. And you're right. At that point in high school, you're just playing because you love the game, and that's not something you're planning on doing later. But all right, a few questions for you, just from thinking about things that happen to a goalie that I've always been curious about. So when you're at that age, especially, and I'm just kind of curious how your teammates reacted. You're in the third period; it's 4-0, 3-0. You're like, oh, I'm going for the shutout, and you give one up with just a few minutes left. How were you able to get yourself back on track?
It's a lot of practice with mental resilience.
Yeah.
Biggest thing I've learned with goaltending is that you just have to be able to learn how to shake it off.
Okay.
Just say, you know what, it wasn't the night, and your team still needs you to perform. So you just have to kind of keep that blank face, because emotion in a goaltender is like blood in the water for a hockey team.
Gotcha.
I have seen it too, and at the other end, when our team beats up a guy and we get up by 6, the first time you hear that paddle hit the post, you're like, it's over.
Right.
You're in the goalie's head. Doesn't matter how hard that team performs.
It's done.
Yeah. So
interesting. Were you the opposite of that? Did you ever let your emotions get the best of you? Because everybody has their moments where it's like maybe you've given up 4 and now it's 4-zip, but.
Oh yeah, we were not that great going into middle school.
Okay.
So there were days I was battling like 30, 35, 40 shots, and it started to get racked up. And I think at first, I'd get frustrated, and I tried to keep it so like you had to actually come up and see me to notice that like I was starting to get to it.
Right.
But yeah, the team, they try to rally around you. They try to pick you up because and your coach, usually in between periods, you talk to them and they just try to calm you down and just say, hey, focus on the next period. And sometimes it happens. You just have a bad game. And it's just kind of like, you just, no matter what, you got to keep your head level. You got to keep your mind in check, focus on the next shot. Because otherwise, I've seen it with other goalies, and you'll be done and they'll pull you for the next guy.
Right.
And then you just feel worse.
Well, and that's something too where I felt like, as an athlete, you have moments in whatever sport you're playing where you're just not performing the way you want to or at the level you want to. And being able to have that resiliency and come back. Goaltending has got to be one of the biggest of all the 4 major sports to like try to bounce back from, because as we've talked about, you're the first guy to get blamed when a goal goes in, and you're the first guy to get the credit when the other team doesn't score many goals. So you've probably I've had bad games on the basketball court. You've been pulled from a game before, right? Have you ever been pulled?
I've been pulled. Yeah, I think one time I had a rough first start period, and they just said, "Hey, take a breather."
Okay.
And that, I think the worst feeling of that then is you go into the next week of practice and you're like, crap, I got to prove myself, because now the other guy likely was managed to either some rally through. So now it's like you feel like you got to start performing harder in practice, because then you feel like, oh, well, I just get replaced and then I have to ride the bench again.
Right.
But I was very lucky. I had coaches who were just very supportive. They're like, okay, as long as we can see you getting your confidence back in, or they'd run drills to kind of like, hey, like get you back on your feet.
Right.
Because I mean, they want you to see you succeed too.
How does that work though for a backup? I've always wondered that, because obviously at this point in Fleury's career, he's looking at possibly splitting time, especially if he goes to the Penguins. He and Tristan Jarry would have to find a way to split time. So have you ever been in a situation where you were playing equal to the other guy on your team?
There were a few times, yeah, where we were both pretty even keel, or sometimes he would take an easier game. When I was a freshman on the varsity team, I was the backup. I was the new guy.
Okay.
That actually was kind of a interesting situation in how school politics also sometimes came into play.
Yeah.
There was no escaping it in our school. It was in every sport, but that actually happened to our goalie the first game. We were playing, I remember Moon Township, and it was
first game of your freshman year.
Yeah, first game. It was an expo, and we were playing a AAA team. But it was funny because this school that we were playing, we had a lot of mixing during our amateur days in elementary school. So both teams knew each other really well. And we got down by 5 goals in the first period. My coach was just like, get your gear on, you're going in. A few expletives were shouted. And that's also when I realized, like, oh, this is varsity level. Like, our coach did not hold back. If he was mad, he would curse us out.
Right.
And so I jumped in, and I actually managed to hold off. I think it was like 43 shots and only 3 goals.
You faced 43 shots in 2 periods, basically?
Oh, yeah. No, it was a gauntlet. And it was the funny thing, because even the other team's coach was starting to applaud, and I had played for him too. So they all knew me very well.
Right.
And then I think it was 2 games later, we were in our first away game at another school. Our starting goalie again forgot his jerseys, so I had to play until they showed up, and this was a 30-minute drive. And I held out for 2 whole periods, and then they started scoring on me after we went through 1 penalty kill, then we went through another, and then a guy went on another, and then we were down on a 5-on-3, and then they finally started scoring.
Right.
And that was one of those moments where the team was like, we can't blame you, dude. We left you hung out to dry because we made choices.
Right. So how was that relationship and was the starter a senior?
Yes.
I mean, that right there, from the get-go, I'm just trying to think of, okay, how was the drama managed by the coaches, by you, like, did you become, decent? Did you have a decent relationship with the starter, the senior? Like, because I've always wondered, there's a competitiveness behind us all, and especially when there's 2 goalies on a team, unless you got the first game, I got the second game, and we're just swapping no matter who we play. I think that's got to be really tough on the mental side of things for a goalie, but also the relationship between 2 people. Because, you and I've talked about he and Robin Leonard when they were at Vegas, and we're not going to talk about the decisions they made with that, but they got along really well. Like, that was a priority. Did you make it a priority to make sure that no matter who was playing, that you guys were good and trying to make each other better?
Oh yeah. My senior year, that goalie, and it was actually a funny story because I think it was one of my lesser known nicknames.
Okay.
There was 4 of us, and we all grew up playing together. And the oldest guy was Zach, Z-A-C. Then his backup was Zach, Z-A-C-H. Or no, he was Z-A-C-K.
Okay.
Then the guy I split time with when he was a senior was Zach, Z-A-C-H. So then everyone was like, well, now you've got to be Zach, Z-A-K.
Yeah, right. No kidding.
But no, the rule was we were always supportive of each other. Like, again, we had grown up playing together. So no matter what, we had the same jersey. So we support each other no matter what.
Okay.
And our coach ran a tight ship. Like, the worst thing you could do was ask for playing time. The only thing that would do is give you a spot on the bench.
Right.
So we felt that idea of like, okay, there's nothing we can do about it. It's all just down to what the coach says. And it got a little tenser as I got older, because then another guy came on the team, and I later found out that it was like by the haste of a parent. So it was a little frustrating because we would meet, and there was 3 of us, and we were all like trying to bust our butts in practice, trying to get that starting spot. And there was a little bit of tension then because we didn't know.
3 of you.
Yeah, we didn't. we didn't know what the criteria was. We just knew that it was like, okay, we got to play. And later I found out that there were some outside forces influencing. But
toughest thing about being a coach at the high school level and more is the parent stuff.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And because I remember being a little suspicious. The first thing our coach said when he walked in the door that year was, nobody asked me about playing time.
Oh.
Nobody gets to ask me when they're going to play, how long they're going to play. Nobody gets to do that. So I was like, okay, that's not something.
That's strange.
Like, I've played for you for 12 years. I've never heard you say that before.
Right. So, you kind of fast forwarding a little bit, did you end up playing all 4 years of high school?
Yeah.
Okay. After the concussion, were you able to be more or less the same player, or do you feel like that hindered you a bit?
No, I came back. So the nice thing was that it basically took me to the end of the season.
Okay.
And then I really hit the camps and working with my goalie coach hard.
Okay.
So I came back pretty strong. I even talked to my coach afterwards. I'm like, hey, how am I doing? He goes, honestly, you look stronger than ever.
Good.
So I came back. Yeah, I rallied pretty well for those last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I felt like it ended off pretty well as far as skill-wise.
Yeah. So, you make the decision. Did you go to Purdue right out of high school?
I did, yes.
Okay.
And it was actually funny because one of my coaches, he was working at, I think it was Cal UP or IUP or Indiana University of Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
One of the smaller state schools. And he was like, yeah, I could take you on as a goalie. And he's like, I know you've got skill. And he was like, do you have any other offers from schools? And when I mentioned Purdue, he looked at me and goes, all right, this is what you're going to do. You're going to go to that school. You're going to get yourself a great degree and go have yourself a nice life.
Yeah.
He's like, most kids coming out of here like that, they go to these schools and play hockey because that's the best that they can do. He's like, if you can get in a school like that, he goes, just go get that degree. Don't worry about hockey.
And this is an academic type thing, right? Did you get an academic scholarship to go there?
Yeah, I had.
Deal?
Yeah, and
that's awesome.
Also, it was ironically cheaper than if I stayed in state. So
that's hilarious, huh? But I mean, still, that's an opportunity you can't pass up, And I think your coach made a really good point. If you have a chance to, get yourself an education that's going to lead to way more opportunities than hockey might provide, because a sport can only provide so much, And so you end up going to Purdue. Was there a point 2 months in, a year in, where you're like, dang it, I really miss playing hockey? Or were you at a point where you were at peace with everything you've done?
Oh, it took me a good year. I remember going to the gym just because I was like, I still train. I got to do something.
Yeah.
And I remember just sitting there looking out sometimes, like after a workout, and just be like, man, a year ago I'd be on the ice. I'd be stopping pucks.
Right.
I was like, it's that Zen area for me. It was always right. So the struggle was finding that new place of comfort for me because I made it for 12 years in the pipes, and I was like, that's not an option anymore.
It's hard. It's got to be so hard to just quit, or not. Sorry, quit, but just to be done. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. And that's it. Nice job, good work. But your love for the game hasn't changed, I'm guessing, right?
No, one of the things that my friends, whenever I first got to Purdue, noticed was, I was a big hockey guy, and that's why I loved. Yeah. And they were always joking that the one thing you never do around JP was never say the word hockey.
Because you just...
Yeah, I just start going. But it was actually kind of funny because it was one of those moments like they would do, in the winter they had an outdoor rink, and I brought my skates. And they were kind of like, okay, I wonder, what's he like? He always says he played hockey. And I just started busting around the ice. And one of my friends was like, okay, I'll challenge you to a race, but you have to go backwards.
You still beat him?
Oh, yeah. And they're like, nope, he was serious about that.
That's funny. That's cool, though, man. You haven't lost the love for it. But, I mean, I guess that's transitioned now to just being a big fan of the game. Obviously, growing up in Pittsburgh, Fleury and the Penguins winning in 2009 must have, got you at your peak.
Yes, that was, I remember.
Yeah, what do you remember from that cup year?
So first thing I remember is that the golden rule of any activity in Pittsburgh during playoff season,
right?
There's always any school event, anything like that. There's the person presenting, and then there's somebody off to the side of that person speaking who has their phone ready.
Yeah.
And it's their job to run out and tell the person to announce if a goal's gone or if the game's over or something happened.
Well, this is 09, so technology was advancing, but it was like the beginning of the iPhone era, so we're still not in like find a score in 3 seconds type territory.
It was that, and I think just a bit of that still tradition.
Yeah.
And also, I think to remind everyone, like, hey, this is a school thing. We'll take care of the scores.
Yeah.
You focus on your kids.
That's awesome. That's awesome, man. That would have been really fun. I definitely, I was in college at the time myself in 09. So, had, kind of thinking about, that year and then leading forward, were you always a fan of Fleury, growing up in Pittsburgh? I mean, he was the guy. He was drafted first overall. I think you and probably most of the city loved him, right?
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, I was a little shaky because Hedberg got traded, and I was like, oh, man.
The Moose.
Yeah, I lost the Moose. But then after watching Fleury a couple times and those canary pads, I was like, you know what, this dude's awesome.
Pillows, baby.
Oh, I'm bummed he never brought those back.
Well, he did, I think, though, that one year, right, when he was wearing the Barrasso mask. It's 2015, maybe? 2015, 16?
Yeah, they were updated because I remember that first day he had Cohos, and I was like,
that turned into Reebok, right?
Yeah.
You were telling me, I asked you about that at work one day. I was like, Chippy, what happened to Coho? Because that was like the brand. Tebow wore them. Fleury wore them, among others. I think Brodeur had worn some Coho pads. Chris Joseph, maybe. Anyway, there was a lot of good goalies from the 90s. But, I'm guessing after 09. Did you go to the parade, by the way?
I wasn't able to go to the parade,
okay.
But also it was pretty cool because I lived in the part of town where a lot of the Penguins players lived.
Oh, that's cool.
So we got a little bit of like special events and things. There was a couple times where the Stanley Cup randomly made an appearance in the local Starbucks.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, the players would sometimes, if they had it for that day, they would walk around town and let people see it.
That's so cool. And you live close to Sydney, didn't you?
I did. Actually, funny thing was one of the kids on my team, he moved out of his house, and Sidney Crosby bought his house.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's neat.
So
and he still lives in that area, doesn't he?
Oh, yeah. No, he's still in that area. From time to time, people would see him downtown. And the unspoken rule was you got to see them, but you just treated them like everybody else.
Yeah, man, I was going and just kind of walk on.
Yep.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah, and then I actually played a couple years with Mario Lemieux's kids were on my team. So for a couple years, Mario Lemieux was at the games. And, again, everyone had that rule. He had like a whole section to himself. Our fans kind of buffered, and the away parents couldn't really see that he was there.
Right.
So it was kind of, again, unspoken rule that it was like, hey, we know you're here. That's cool, but
that's so cool.
We'll let you be.
That's why I think the years and years that I grew up loving hockey, and now the last couple of years I've really started to realize that the hockey players, unless maybe like a McDavid right now were to go, or Austin Matthews in Toronto.
Yeah.
In general, most of the hockey players are just, regular guys and like to be treated as such, and the fans respect that. And I really do like that about them, and then there's something about like an NBA player, if Giannis Antetokounmpo is walking through town, it's a 7-foot guy walking through town, and that's got to be somebody, and so I think the hockey players has been cool to see that the fans generally don't do the bad freak out, whole deal. So.
Oh yeah, and I think also they have the nice benefit too of, because hockey's not as popular, they can still, outside of their home territory, they're not seldom to get recognized. I think we actually joked the one time if Crosby, Malkin, and Fleury showed up in Sitka, nobody would bother them.
Except you and me.
Yeah,
we would be there. Hey, JP, we got to find them, man. Okay, so you wanted to touch a little bit on kind of the stigma, right, of goaltenders and like how they're viewed by the general fans. And I'm really curious to hear this a little bit, because then we'll lead into kind of Fleury a bit, how he's talked about. What is something that you realize, like you as a former goalie, and a person who watches, and then you hear people saying things about goaltenders, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you're like, oh, geez, not this again?
I would have to say, either that we're crazy.
Yeah.
I think that's the big one. They're like, why would you want to do that?
Yeah.
And like, because it's fun.
Right.
The other thing too is that we can be a little weird.
Right.
I think.
What is it about goalies that you don't think is weird because it's normal for you? But like, what's the first thing you people tend to think is like that's strange? Other than like, who wants to stand in front of 100+ mile per hour puck, made of rubber hitting them in the chest or face or whatever? What else is that you think?
I think it's kind of the antics. Goalies are a very superstitious bunch.
I love it.
So it's kind of like whatever happens in that one game you do really well, you feel like you got to repeat the process.
Right.
And
That's funny.
it just so happens usually you're doing something strange at the time.
Really?
Yeah. The other thing too is that because your position's so different than the rest of the team, it's like you're a part of the team, but you operate independently.
Okay.
And like I mentioned with the coaches, it kind of leave you to your own devices. So the players don't really get what you're doing at a lot of times. So you're kind of like a bit of a, I don't want to say oddity, but you
stand out more than anybody else.
Yeah, you stand out more. And I remember, so I think that would be probably the one thing that I would notice, like with my team. Right. But the other thing too is that I think goalies are usually the first one that like the team would back up and support the most.
Even if goals are going in type deal?
Oh, yeah, because they tend to know it's like, hey, defensemen, they know when they screwed up. They know when they've drifted and they left that back door open. They let that 1-2 in.
Well, then why is it that from a player's perspective, if I'm, you and I are playing goalie and whoever's on the bench, whoever's skating, we're going to support each other, obviously our teams. Why is it that fans are so quick? That we're not talking about like the fans, people who have gone to games, who have played the game, who studied the game. Just the general, I live in Minnesota, I'm going to go to a Wild game. Why is it that a goal's given up? Oh, geez, Fleury let one in. Why is it so easy for people to do that, you think?
I think it's because they look at hockey goalies, and the biggest one I always hear is it's like the net's 4x6. And they think, oh, you're a person. You should be able to easily cover that. How hard is it to get, to stop a puck like that in such a small net? Well, it's pretty hard, actually, because if it was that easy, every team would have just gone a sumo-sized goaltender, put pads that fit him, and shoved him into the net.
Yeah, right.
And it's not, and as a human trying to, because all the players have to do to get the puck from one side of the ice to the other is a quick flick of the wrist. Right. What a goalie has to do is get a leg up, push his entire 150-pound frame across that net, and then get it firmly in place. Right. And not only do that, but do it accurately and do it in a manner that's going to get him to not overshoot, undershoot. Right. So there's a lot of like quick calculations and things that you have to do. Okay. All in the same time it takes a player to just look, snap, boom.
And I think knowing all the technicalities of what it takes to be in position for all these different shots. We've had this conversation a few times where, when Fleury was in Chicago this year, which I'm going to try to forget, other than the setup was amazing. Yeah. As he'd give up 4 goals, give up 3 goals, and you and I would talk about, okay, how many of those were his fault? And oftentimes you and I would agree, the first one or the second one or the third one, he should have had it. Do you think fans don't tend to look at the game that way? They just see, oh, Fleury gave up 4 goals. He's not sharp right now. Deal.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of times fans don't understand the limitations of what a goalie can do. Mm-hmm. There are just times where a puck will go in at a certain point or a certain area that is just it's physically impossible for the body shape to just get something in that space. Right.
You have to give credit to the shooter. Like, hey, like Kaprizov had a couple this year where he's shooting from like, if I'm, my back is the post, he's shooting from right here and it goes off my shoulder and in like.
That's just bad luck. Yeah. Yeah. There's also ones where it's like, if you stop the first one, you stop the second one and your defense isn't clearing that. Mm-hmm. That's on the defense then, because they should be in there. Once that puck's starting to crash in, they should be in there. They should be getting it clear. Right. It's a huge ask to have a goalie be able to get 3 rebounds in a row.
Right. Right. And that's one thing that I've noticed too, is like they are so quick to just see the number of goals. 4 goals on Fleury today, 850 save percentage. Well, when he was in Vegas, when he won the Vezina last year, which was just amazing, his defense was so good, he rarely had to make more than one save. Obviously, he made some spectacular saves, but he knew he could do that knowing his defense was there. Do you feel like, too, when you were playing goalie that when you played on those teams that were really good defensively, you could kind of overcommit to certain saves knowing that the puck would eventually get cleared out? Because I'm guessing that's a calculated risk that you have to take sometimes, right?
Yes. Also, it's just easier because your defense is going to shut down those harder to hit goals where a lot of times we've talked about where fans are shouting shoot, shoot, but you know that the offense, they're setting up for like a 1-2 center shot.
Yeah, right.
Your defense is going to be able to shut those kinds of things down and
Right.
limit the kinds of shots that the other team can take.
Mm-hmm.
Usually I noticed a lot of times they're like long shots from the point where they're just trying to crash the net. And that's like an easy, I can knock that to the corner.
Right.
But yeah, when the defense when they're beating the defense and that puck's moving everywhere and you got players open back door,
right,
that makes the quality of the shot a lot harder to stop.
I gotcha.
The other thing too, yeah, so that's a big thing too. If you don't have that defense support, and the other thing too, I used to always say like guys like Tim Thomas, Corey Crawford, guys would praise them because they were on these Stanley Cup teams, but then you look and they had like the number one defense, and fans and talk show people would ask goalie experts like, "Oh, are these goalies going to be the next Hall of Famer?" And that most of the time the response was, "They're damn lucky to be in the NHL." And sure enough, both those guys went out to either foreign leagues or minor leagues because once the teams and the defense dried up, they got beat because they weren't good, but they were just good enough.
Yeah, it really makes you wonder. I mean, obviously, we don't talk about Formula One really, but Formula One is so the disparity between the best car and the worst car. Like you could put the best driver in the worst car, and he's still going to be at the back of the finishing order. So I get that, but it's when you got a goalie that's very, very good on a good defensive team, a la Brodeur, Patrick Roy.
Yeah.
I think you look at those two guys. I'm not ready to put Fleury in that category yet. When he retires, sure, I'll put him there. But you look at those two guys, and they were just really good on all the teams they played on, whether they were on a bad team defensively or good. But I even looked at Fleury's numbers, actually. The year he was drafted, he had like an 898 save percentage, or no, it was like 902 or something. But he gave up over 3 goals a game, but he was the first pick. So, like, there obviously was something that all the scouts saw, that he was on an awful defensive team, yet he was still putting up those numbers. You know what I mean? Like, it was very interesting for me to see, like, wait, what? This is the first pick, you know?
Oh, yeah. And that's like, again, you have to think that was just as the Penguins were starting to retool. Like Lemieux's era, the Kovalevs, I think it was like Marty Straka. Those guys are
Yager's gone by then, right?
Yeah. And that was just as like we had just gotten Crosby. We had yet to get Malkin. They were just starting to retool the team. But again, that's why you get those coaches that are at that high level, is that they can look past those statistics and numbers and they can see the raw talent of a goalie and that potential.
Gosh, if only the casual fan could take a look, and look at that. What do you think? Like, if you could tell, any of I don't think most people that are watching this are all good, big fans of the game and whatnot. But if you could, send a message out to every casual hockey fan that tries to blame goalies, I mean, what would be something you would tell them to maybe consider next time they say, geez, the Wild or the Penguins lost 4-2, Fleury, thanks a lot, it's your fault. What would you say to counteract that? I
would just say, if it was that easy, you'd see a lot more goalies.
Mm-hmm.
Fact of the matter is, for every team, you got 2. It's because not many people can play it, not many people can do it, and just take a moment to appreciate how much it takes to even be in that position.
Right.
And also take some actual time and look up some basics of goaltending. Like YouTube's a thing now. You can easily find a goalie YouTube
so much
channel
out there now.
Oh my goodness, yeah. And it's funny too, because even some of the most incredible saves look the most nonchalant saves ever. There was one I remember we were watching where a guy it was a pass from below the goal line, went up through an entire amount of traffic off a one-timer, going through 2 or 3 guys worth of traffic,
right,
and just quick snagged with a glove, and that was it. But
so the puck tracking must have just been incredible for that.
It was unreal. Wow. Like I don't know many goalies that could have kept track of that.
How talking about tough saves too, deflections seem to be one of the best ways to score on a goalie because they're very unpredictable, no matter how good you are. How are you taught? That's something I want to make sure I ask you. How are you taught to play those? Because slaps, a lot of times when I see guys slap it from the point, they're not necessarily aiming at the goalie. They're aiming. You see Crosby's so good at those where he just like sticks the stick like that and it goes off the stick and like goes over the shoulder. You're like, how did he even do that?
That's just being Sidney Crosby.
Right. But I mean, were you ever taught to kind of read that might be coming just so you can react in time? Or
Oh yeah, no, you generally get to know after a while of play, and it also helps when you study offensive drills too.
Okay.
You know when like, okay, a pass is coming, where it's going. And as soon as you kind of see up and what the player's doing, you know like a shot's coming, you know they're getting ready.
Right.
There's times like anytime the puck's below the goal line and that pass is going up, I know like, okay, that's coming in for a shot.
Right.
And then you know based on where it hits you, where that puck's likely going to go. And I was always taught you watch it all the way in, and then as soon as it hits you,
right.
If you haven't covered it, you're already starting to rotate. Your eyes are
Okay.
tracking. First thing is looking, that head's constantly there. You're pivoting, and you're already starting to move towards that puck.
Okay, gotcha. Well, and I imagine that's no matter how much coaching you have, those are going to be some of the toughest saves to make. But let's spend a few minutes now talking about our favorite goaltender. Right off the bat, obviously he was in Pittsburgh, so that helps. But like, what is it about Marc-Andre Fleury that has always made him, a goalie that you've looked up to, someone you've been a big fan of?
I would first have to say his general attitude. I can very much relate. I was, I think one of the things that always ticked off my coaches was that I was the kind of goalie where I just had to be relaxed and have fun, and that's when I was at my best.
Mm-hmm.
And you see that a lot with Fleury. He was a team jokester. Like, he was always having fun. He was always laughing, cracking jokes. Even when he was in scrimmages or kind of close to games, if you'd ever hear him mic'd up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he just had fun. And I think that is just that's the attitude you have to have as a goalie. Mm-hmm. You can't get yourself psyched up. You can't get yourself angry or the kind of ready for war mentality like a forward, because you may end up spending the first 3 minutes of the game just standing there.
That has happened, and that's got to be tough too. Fleury's talked about that, like when you're cold and like you finally get your first chance of the save 7 minutes into the game, and if you let it in, it's just like, jeez.
Oh my god!
But that's one of the first things that, as I've become a bigger fan of him, even more, is just his attitude and his playfulness on the ice. Whether it's like a 5-4 game and he makes a great save, or a 2-0 game, 1-0, he's always having fun out there. What about like his style of play, because he gets criticized, at least nowadays, because everybody's got an opinion. His flailing glove saves, kind of diving and flailing his body to one side, because it's not technically sound, you know what I mean? But it's also very exciting as a fan, and probably demoralizing for the other team when he's able to make one of those crazy saves. Like, as a goalie, a former goalie, do you enjoy that more, less? How do you feel about that kind of erraticness that he plays with sometimes?
I'm not a huge fan of erraticness, because then at that point you're really committed, you're really relying that that's going to work.
Right.
And if it doesn't, then it ends up just biting you in the butt.
Yeah.
I think again, some goalies can pull it off. Fleury has done it pretty well. And there's also, and I think a little bit when he was back in like the 09-08 when he was younger, I think he was a little bit more strategic about it.
Okay.
Like that famous dive at the end of the Stanley Cup, like he knew that's just what you had to do.
Well, there was only 2 seconds left. Like after the save's made, it should be over.
Yeah. So I think for him, I liked it a little bit better when he had that kind of discipline with his saves, and it's just like, okay, occasionally you have to make that desperation, because that's just where you've gotten to at that point.
You got no other options, right?
Yeah, and that's the joke I make about, when you say having to move that 150-pound body, usually by the third one, all a semblance of organization in your game has gone out the window. You're just flailing at that point.
Just hoping that you can get a body part in there somehow.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen some saves, where goalies like kick the pad back and the skate deflects the puck off, where the blocker comes in and like gets the pinky finger of the blocker, and it's just like,
my paddle or my goalie stick used to have chips up the shaft because the puck managed to hit not the paddle, but like that little narrow shaft
and go off into the boards.
Yeah.
Do you remember one of your best saves? Like what's one of your favorites that comes to mind?
Oh, there was one in an outdoor game, and this is what I loved about being in Pittsburgh was it was set up on I think it was the MLB team it was like the Riverhounds, the soccer team, but their field was right against the Monongahela River that overlooked the skyline, and our team was dominating. They were down at the other end, and the guy came down a breakaway up the side. And I was thinking like, oh crap, I've been cold this whole time, both mentally and literally. It was cold. It was the middle of winter.
Oh geez, okay.
And I remember it because it was the first time I could audibly hear a player in the middle of a game, and I could hear him going, oh, goes up. I butterfly slide across with him, snag him with my glove as he's coming across, do the whole windmill.
Yeah.
And he curses me out.
That's awesome.
But that was one of those. I think there was also one I remember where, I was like flailing somewhere on the ice, and then somebody tried to flip it up over me, and my hand just shot up and grabbed it.
That's awesome. And it's got to be cool because we don't get to hear them as much. It'd be awesome if I could hear, the other players when Fleury makes one of those crazy saves, and just like I remember one guy, Ryan Hartman, on the Wild last year. He got stoned like 5 times in a row. Like amazing saves by Fleury, and you could just hear him skating back, and he said a word I'm not going to repeat very loud, so the whole rink could hear it. I'm guessing, on that one too, you probably heard a few choice words said your way,
Oh yeah, no, I would hear a few players get they love to throw curse.
Isn't cursing like the language of hockey players more or less?
It is, yeah.
Like sailor mouths.
Oh god, yeah, and the fans too, which is not great to say for a youth league, but it was a big problem.
Well, if all the players are doing it, the fans, the parents might as well do it as well, right?
Oh yeah, but I remember, especially in Pittsburgh, every goalie idolized Fleury. He was the king in that area. Everybody loved him. It was interesting though, in his early 20s when he was there was a little bit of a struggle bit, and you had a few guys like Thomas Vokoun who came in and played a bit.
I remember, yeah. Yeah,
and I remember a lot of my guys and friends, they're like, oh, this is the end of Fleury and that. And,
already?
Well,
Vokoun was that 07, 08, 09? Because it wasn't 09. 09 was Garon.
No, it was like 07, 06.
Okay, so the year before their first cup run. Okay.
Yeah, and it was – I had it explained by like a really good goalie coach later on in my career. But essentially, it's like that early 20s area. You got to remember these are still people. So Fleury's, he's essentially a college age kid who's making millions and being starter for a pro hockey team.
Yeah,
there's a level of mental development that coaches that he told me, because this guy was NHL bound as a goalie coach, and he explained like you have to have that level of understanding that these guys got to mentally develop too.
Right.
And everyone kept telling me, oh, he's not there. And I was like, just give time. Remember, he's still young.
Yeah.
Sure enough, a couple of years later, they make the 09 run. They make consistent back-to-back. And Fleury was, every time they made the playoff runs, Fleury was the guy. He cranked it up during the playoffs. And then they made the back-to-back.
And I thought it was great, too. This was something that doing a research, I found out. But he, in 09, Game 5, gave up a lot of goals, and they got whooped, and Detroit was up 3-2, and love his coach, threw him right back out there, gave up 1 goal in Game 6, gave up 1 goal in Game 7, and they won it. And his resiliency, I think that, as you said, that's got to be one of your biggest traits, most important things as a goaltender. You're going to get scored on.
That's what every goalie coach they look for. If goalie coaches at that level, right, they don't want the emotional goalies. They want someone who you could not. If all you could tell for the game, if they didn't have the scoreboard up there, you should not be able to tell the score by looking at that goalie's face. Gotcha. They should be blank, expressionless if that puck's in the net, scoop it out, no emotion.
Right. Did you have like a thing that you went through when a goal would go in? Because, Fleury, he still does it. Skates to the boards, says a few choice words under his breath or out loud, or maybe not loud enough for everybody to hear it, but I can see him. And I even read about this, and he gets it out of his system, and by the time he's back in the crease, 0-0 game in his head. Obviously it's not, but that's the reset that he does. Did you do anything like that when goals go in? Would you, replay it in your head, or do you just say it's too late, can't do anything about it, on to the next one?
I would usually kind of just try and blank it out. I would just kind of stare up up at the clock. I'd try to ignore the players because they'd be doing their thing, and then I just would mostly focus, like turn around, just kind of look at the puck, bring it out, and then just kind of look for the ref, and just kind of have that focus of just like, because he was always an ambiguous figure, so I just kind of keep my focus and attention on the ref as I was getting it out.
Gotcha.
And then I'd be like, okay, kind of like check my crease, tap. What I would always do is glove and paddle tap on the sides, check my centering, and then just scoot back out there ready for the next one.
Did you ever play in an arena where the replay would happen after a goal, where you could see it? Because I wonder, sometimes I've seen Fleury do this when a goal's gone in and he's like, how did that happen? He just has that look on his face and he'll look up and the replay will happen. And, oh, gosh, it went up that dude's skate. You know what I mean? Because he's not at home where we're all like, oh, gosh. Like, game 1 against the Wild, they scored on him. He's moving to his right and he hits a guy's skate and goes completely the other direction, right through the 5-hole. I'm like, you can't do anything about that.
No, that's just bad luck.
Did you ever have that chance to be able to look up and be like, oh, okay?
No.
You didn't play in an arena like that?
No, I think I did get a chance. Because we did our regional championships in Consol. Okay. So that was like the only time maybe close. But I don't even think they turned them on for us.
Because nowadays, geez, goalie's going to the locker room, you got an iPad full of every single shot and save that you made, and you can say, oh, these guys are doing this every game, every time the shot comes in, they're positioning this way. Now I can adjust to it, So it's the technology is sure advanced. I mean, I'm curious now, post playing career, have you ever thought about one day being a goalie coach? Like maybe when you have kids or something one day, like getting back into the game that way?
Oh yeah, no. If I had a kid and they wanted to be goalie, I'd be all over figuring out what the next step, leading edge. Because awesome. I've already, as I was getting into my senior year, there were a couple of younger kids. We would volunteer as coaches for youth teams, and so they pulled me to coach the goalies, and it's again that little bit of like, I'd see kids who get excited and they would really start to have that first love for it, and that was kind of the realization of like, okay, now I'm getting to that point. It's like it's passing it on to the next crew,
right?
And
that would be awesome for you.
Yeah, so that was a lot of fun, and I would love to do that again in a heartbeat.
Hopefully, you end up getting yourself involved in that again in the future. Because coaching, I'll tell you this, man, I was talking to people about that when we won our championship in basketball there a few months ago. Winning as a player is always fun, but it's a whole different, more fulfilling experience in a way, being the coach, like having your hand in, if you're the head coach, but if you're the goalie coach, even like, all the great saves that were made, clutch saves, you have just as big a part of that as anybody. And it's definitely, you'll see one day. I can't imagine doing it, like seeing your own kid win something and being a part of it. But for sure, dude. Well, let's kind of wrap it up here with, Fleury's going into the twilight years. He's still good. I don't care what anybody says. Like, obviously I'm biased, you're biased, but the dude won the Vezina last year. Okay. He was on a great defensive team, but he was at the top of his game toward the end of his career, which you don't see that too often. Brodeur kind of trailed off playing with the Blues. Waugh kind of did. I mean, I feel like Waugh could have kept playing a couple more years. Hasek too. But looking forward, what would you like to see from the last year or two, of maybe 3 of his career? What are you hoping for from him?
I really hope that, first of all, he gets on a team that he loves and in a fan base that really cares for him.
Which we both are hoping for the same team.
Yeah.
Clearly.
But I think also just to go out on a good note on his terms. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of times those guys like Brodeur, who they had the name and they just kept playing way past their prime.
Right.
I think almost for Fleury, I'd like to see him get that last good run, however it looks, however it is, just one last good run, and then
call it good.
Yeah, and just leave on a good note. And I think he'd be really happy with that.
Right. I think doing it with Pittsburgh would be the ultimate tip of the hat type thing, even if it's just this next year, and he goes in, he signs with Pittsburgh for cheaper just so he can play there, split the time with Jari, and gets a chance to play in the playoffs and help him win a cup. I mean, what else is there left to really accomplish? Sydney's only got 2 or 3 years left, and I think that's the ideal situation, right? But maybe not. I don't know.
I personally would like to see it. I think everyone in Pittsburgh I know would love to see that just last ride of the original 3.
Yeah.
I think I could also, though, if he stayed on the Wilds, I'd be okay with that. I think they have a good fan base. I think they're building up a good team.
They have a good team. They have some very hot and cold fans from what I saw, but they do love hockey. When they're doing well, man, they're just as passionate as anybody. So
yeah, I think above all, I think I'd just like to see him end without respect.
Yes,
he's earned that much from every
for sure.
team that he's played for.
Think about it. As soon as he got to Minnesota, all of his teammates, within a few days, talked about just how great of a person he is.
Oh,
and I'm like, that right there speaks well. And most of the fans, I feel like, tend to, when he has a couple bad games, just throw all that out the window. It's like, come on now, like,
it happens. And like you were saying, with goalies, when they have a bad game, everybody knows it because you can see it right there.
Right, 4-1, 5-1,
yeah. Where forwards, they can get away with it a bit. If they make a bad shot or off thing miss,
exactly,
it's harder to notice.
Mm-hmm. I had a conversation with a person who I won't name because he's very unreasonable with his points he was trying to make. But we were having a conversation, debate about, okay, well, Crosby, he was a much better teammate than Fleury. He was a much better player than Fleury. I'm like, this is a tough debate to have because we're talking about two different positions. We're talking about totally different ways to impact the game. He goes, well, Fleury's a big jokester and made all these mistakes in the net. I'm like, well, how about all those times Crosby didn't get back on defense? Nobody's perfect. Or he made a bad pass that led to a turnover that led to a goal. Like you said, that's not talked about at all. But the 3 goals Fleury gave up when he was out of position barely, or made a bad rebound or gave up a bad rebound, those are going to be the first things that are talked about. It's just, it just seems like it's too easy to put it on the goalie,
And yeah, last thing I'll add on to that is I think for keeping in mind when you're comparing players and goalies, in all the years I played, I've never heard anyone compare impact on teams because everybody knows on a hockey team, goalie, you're kind of more of either a morale booster. When you make a save and you're playing well, that's how you impact the team. It's your performance, because I very rarely can talk to my players unless it's down on our end.
Mm-hmm.
Guys like Crosby, they're able to communicate. They're captains. They're those leaders, motivating. And again, because goalies kind of have that level of separation from the rest of the team, you're inherently not going to be a leading figure on the team. You're always going to kind of be that side rock that the team, if it's a rough game, they're going to lean on you.
Right. Well, that just gives you more responsibility then, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, geez, now you don't have enough pressure already to perform, but it's got to be one of those things too, where you look at it as a challenge you want to step up to, as opposed to, like shying away from it and feeling too much pressure. But
oh my goodness, you just focus on the puck at that point. Everything else comes with it. So you do that one job, you do the rest.
Right. Well, do you look back, kind of in review, do you look back, do you feel very fulfilled with the hockey that you've played, at least thus far?
Oh, yeah. I enjoyed my time. I had a lot of great players I got to play with. I got a lot of great opportunities from being able to travel around Western PA to getting to play in Consol Energy to I think it was I think probably the most favorite one I ever had was I don't know how our coach swung this, but I think it was Joey Mullen come by once for.
Should I know who that is? Joey Mullen?
Joey Mullen. Yeah, he was a big Penguins player back in I want to say it was in the 80s.
My dad would probably know who he is then, yeah.
I think the best thing I can say was he was the last guy for that 1980 Olympic team.
Oh, okay.
He was the guy that Herb wanted, but he made a signing, and he signed on to the NHL, so he couldn't play anymore.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But, somehow he swung, and he was able to come, and I was in net, and he just happens like, oh, I'll take a shot on you. And
it was an absolute rocket.
Well, I hope not, because I was only 9 at the time.
Okay, all right, there we go.
But it did hit. Let's just say it hit it a little further south, and I balled over.
Yeah.
My first question was like, "Did I stop?" And he went, "Yes." He goes, "I'm okay."
That's hilarious. Well, I was wondering about that too. The pads they have like a padded super tight shirt they put on, and then over that, the chest protector covers that up completely, doesn't it? Or not that good?
No, you wear a goalie cup.
Is there a cup underneath that?
Yep.
Because I saw there a pad that covers up like between the legs too, right? Kind of like hangs down a bit.
It kind of covers the stomach, and the idea is if like you ever pull up, there's still something there.
Oh,
Because
okay.
there were a lot of times I didn't have that extra lower bit,
Oh, okay.
and I would lean back or I'd lean up,
Right.
and it hit me right in the stomach. And
Sheesh, yeah. Well, the
Yeah.
pads have come a long way since then too.
oh,
You know,
without a doubt.
they're so light, and that was the thing that struck me is when I was looking at gear in Washington. I was like, I pick stuff up. I'm like, this is it. You know, like
Yeah.
this is all it weighs. Then finding out, you know, it's like $2,500 to get geared up to play goalie nowadays.
Oh yeah, no, I think my last full set costed me same price as like a
Yeah.
new car, or not new, but like a first
Like a used car, yeah.
I will.
Jeez.
I will also say one funny fact that I learned, and I had to do this with all of my chest protectors,
Okay.
is you know how they're a little stiff when you first get them?
Okay.
The trick I learned to get them to be like buttery, like they're not even there, is you have to go into the shower, you have to basically turn it into a steam sauna, and then you have to start moving around in the pads.
Really?
So yeah, there was a time where I was basically having to stand in a bathroom and it was extremely steamed up from a shower, wearing my chest protector and moving around, just like walking around and moving it. And
That's hilarious.
It worked though. Like that,
just the moisture in there got it to loosen up, huh?
But ever since I did that, I never noticed I was wearing it.
That's interesting because, you know, first thing I compared to it was like a baseball glove where you put that oil in there and you wrap it and then it's just like super loose and easy, you know. But, well, that's cool. I'm sure you and I could sit here and talk about all the
I don't want to like
intricacies.
keep all that.
Yeah, but no, that's cool to hear all these stories, JP, because just hearing, you know, stories from a person who's played goalie and then, you know, how the game is interpreted from your point of view as opposed to someone who's not played but loves goalies, and then someone who's not played that just watches the game regularly. I mean, there's a lot more we could get into, but in closing, then, if Fleury signs with Pittsburgh this coming year, what's the first thing you're going to do? How are you going to react to that?
I am going to be excited. Probably call my dad and be like, "Holy hell! Did you see what happened? It actually went through." And I probably might get myself the last style Fleury jersey.
Yeah, last one he gets. Are you going to try to go see him play? If he goes there, because I know I really want to get over to Pennsylvania and see a game if he plays there.
Oh, I would love. I'll have to see. Yeah, depending on where I am at that point, I would love to see Fleury play one last round in console.
Yeah, that would be awesome, man.
Oh wait, it's PBG paint now.
Okay. Yeah, but it doesn't matter to me. I knew what you were talking about, but especially like in a playoff game too, that would just be intense, wouldn't it?
There's nothing like Pittsburgh in playoffs. Oh, okay.
Go ahead, go for it.
Okay,
one more story for us.
Yes, one more story.
Right.
Pittsburgh started this whole trend where obviously playoff tickets are expensive. There's only so many. So what they did was outside the arena, they put up this giant movie theater screen, and everybody could just come in for free, sit in the parking lot, or they closed off this entire parking lot.
Yeah, and just stand there and watch.
Well, you can bring lawn chairs, things like that.
Right.
But yeah, like people from all over would just come and they would just sit and they would watch the game outside, and they would do live feeds in. And I think that was one of the first ones where they did that.
Right. Well, and I remember there's always those videos now when they were in, you know, winning the cup, they would go to where they're at. Everybody's celebrating in the parking lot, you know, freaking out.
Yeah, they would usually have like a big jumbotron there.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Well, hopefully, you and I don't know where you're going to end up next year. You're not going to be in Pennsylvania, are you? I
don't think so, but I could definitely swing my way that way if it meant seeing Fleury play.
That would be really cool. Post a video on here. Like, here we are. We're at the game. We're going to see him play. Because the only time I saw him play, he got pulled in the first period, and I'll never forget that. I actually sent him a video and told him about that. He got to check that out. So, thanks again, dude. Appreciate you coming on. And,
thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Absolutely. And thanks everybody for checking it out. Real, actual, in-person interview. Believe that or not. We'll catch you on the next one. Thanks, everybody.
Have a good one.
Awesome, dude. That was fun.
That was.
So many fun stories.